Hi, I'm Sandra. I was invited to the family ski trip, last minute, as always. But when I arrived, there was no room booked for me. Not a mistake, a message. They gave my sister the best suite, toasted my cousin's new venture, and handed me a chair behind a column. Then, they watched me sign paychecks for every staff member at the resort they didn't realize I owned. What hurts more, being left out of a photo? Or realizing you were never meant to be in the frame at all? How long can someone stay quiet before silence becomes its own kind of scream? It was just past 3 when I pulled up to the resort. Snow was already dusting the windshield, soft and soundless. I parked near the service entrance. Old habit. My mother always said front valet was for guests, not helpers. I wasn't in the mood to be corrected before I'd even unzipped my coat. The lodge was buzzing, full of chatter and echoing footsteps, the scent of pine mixed with roasted coffee. Everyone had arrived early. Of course they had. The Hartwells were never late, unless it involved me. I walked in alone. Every cousin, uncle, step-sibling had come in packs, pulling wheeled suitcases, laughing about spa reservations and ski passes. No one noticed me at first. I didn't expect them to. They never did, unless there was a forgotten errand or a missing bottle of wine to track down. At the front desk, a young receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Cedar Crest. Name, please?" "Sandra Hartwell." He started typing, then stopped, frowned. "I'm sorry, I'm not seeing a reservation under that name." I didn't flinch. "Try Sandra M. Hartwell. Middle initial might have been used." He typed again. Nothing. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice before I saw her. "Sandra, you made it!" She approached like someone bumping into a neighbor at the grocery store, not like the person who gave birth to me. "I thought you weren't coming," she said, with that airy tone she uses when she's pretending not to be responsible. "So we figured we'd wait to book your room. Didn't want to waste the money if you had a work thing pop up last minute." I smiled. Not with my mouth. Just enough to acknowledge I'd heard her. "No worries," I said. "I'll take care of it." Before she could say another word, Isolde chimed in from behind, holding a ceramic mug that probably cost more than most people's groceries. "We assumed you were tied up with your, what is it now? Branding boutique? Graphic storytelling? Something creative." I didn't correct her. I hadn't corrected her in years. "I'll figure it out," I said, turning back to the receptionist. "Can you check for any last-minute availability? I'll cover it." He nodded, flustered. "Of course, ma'am." I gave him my card. No drama, no sighing, no scene. Just like always. As he processed the booking, another staff member, clearly more senior, stepped out from a side office. He whispered something to the young man, who nodded quickly, then stepped aside. The manager approached me directly. "Ms. Hartwell, welcome back," he said, with a warmth I hadn't felt all day. "Your presence is a pleasure. Would you like assistance with your luggage?" Before I could respond, a bellhop approached and spoke, loud enough for my mother and sister to hear. "Ms. Hartwell, may I take your bags to the executive wing?" Delora turned her head. "Executive wing?" The bellhop didn't blink. "Yes, ma'am, the suite is ready." I paused for half a second, long enough for the moment to sting, but not fester. "I'll carry it myself," I said gently. "Thank you." The bellhop hesitated, nodded, then stepped back respectfully. Delora's brow furrowed slightly. Isolde's jaw tightened just a bit. It wasn't a storm. Not yet. But the weather was shifting. I turned toward the elevator without another word. Once inside, I pulled out my phone and opened the last message I'd received that morning. "Payroll ready for Monday. Everything's on track. Welcome back, boss. Eloy." I stared at the screen a moment longer than necessary. Then I slid the phone back into my coat. Funny thing about blood. Sometimes it runs colder than snowmelt. From the balcony of my suite, yes, the executive wing, I could see the windows of my family's reserved block across the courtyard. Laughter filtered through the glass. Firelight danced behind heavy curtains. It was a postcard-perfect scene, one I was never really in. If they thought I was still that girl they could forget, this weekend would be a rude awakening. I didn't unpack right away. I left the suitcase standing in the middle of the room like it had questions I didn't feel like answering yet. The door clicked shut behind me with that heavy, spring-loaded thunk. Just past sunset, the hallway buzzed with an old industrial heater kicking on. Not cozy, functional. The walls were a pale beige, one of those colors that feels like it's trying not to offend anyone. The window, barely wider than my shoulders, gave me a view of the delivery dock. I didn't expect a suite. But this? This was punishment in architectural form. The room sat adjacent to the equipment storage area, marked by a subtle vibration in the wall every time someone rolled a metal cart past. I glanced around. Twin bed, mismatched lamp. A kettle so old it looked like it belonged in a museum on low-budget hospitality. 5 minutes later, a knock. The young receptionist stood there, shoulders tight. "Ms. Hartwell, I just wanted to apologize. This room, it's usually for overflow staff. We tried to find something better, but..." I raised an eyebrow. He swallowed. "Your family insisted you'd be fine here." I didn't blink. "Which family member?" His mouth opened, closed. Then he offered a meek, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Not for him, for me, for having expected anything more. After he left, I slid my suitcase to the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress hissed beneath me, one of those plastic covers that always made sleep feel like a hospital stay. I took out a sweater, folded tightly from years of habit. Then another. I unpacked my things slowly, not because I needed them, but because the motion kept my hands busy. Folding, smoothing, pretending. Around 7, my phone buzzed. "Come up to the lounge for drinks. Everyone's here." "Mom!" I changed into something presentable, reapplied lipstick under the cold fluorescent mirror, and headed upstairs. The lounge was all warm lights and laughter. Fireplaces crackled on either end. Soft jazz hummed beneath clinking glasses. They'd arranged themselves in a half-circle of armchairs, like royalty holding court. I walked in like a side note. Delora was perched on the edge of her seat, already mid-story to some distant cousin's wife. "Sandra always preferred solitude," she was saying, swirling her glass. "Even as a little girl, she'd sneak off to draw or read instead of playing with the others. It's always been her nature." I paused at the doorway long enough to hear the punchline of the life I never volunteered to be rewritten. She saw me then. "Darling," she called, holding out a hand. "Is the room not too rustic? You've always liked your space." "Sure," I said, stepping closer. "It's quiet." "Exactly," she smiled. "You were never one for the crowds. You pulled away on your own. We never pushed you out." I studied her, so gentle, so rehearsed, like she was reading from the back of a greeting card that excused every omission with a flourish of poetic grace. And in that moment, I remembered a 4th of July, 10, maybe 15 years ago. I'd shown up early to help set up, arms full of decorations I paid for. Delora had looked at me, bemused. "Why don't you just enjoy the day, honey?" she said. "You'll probably just get in the way." That had been the turning point. The moment I realized no matter how early I showed up, I'd never be seen as someone who belonged at the table, only as someone trying too hard to earn a seat at it. Back in the present, I watched as Isolde laughed at some inside joke with Torin, who was regaling a couple from Denver about family legacy and connections in hospitality. No one mentioned what I did, what I'd built. I wasn't even sure they remembered. But I did. I stood quietly, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server, and leaned against the far wall. Observation had become my refuge. Watching, remembering, storing moments like pebbles in my pocket, small, forgettable things to everyone else, but heavy enough to weigh down memory. An hour later, I slipped out, unnoticed. Back in the room, I didn't turn on the light. The glow from the parking lot was enough to move around. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. No emails. Just one folder on the desktop labeled Resort Ownership, Confidential Contacts. I clicked it open, scanned the files. One document stared back at me. Full legal deed, notarized, dated 6 months ago. A slow smile found its way to my lips. Let's see how invisible I really am. Morning sunlight crept through the crack in the curtains like it didn't want to intrude. I sat at the small desk, sipping coffee from a paper cup. The heater hummed low, rattling against the vent. Down the hall, someone wheeled a supply cart, probably loading linens into the storage room beside mine. I didn't mind the noise. It reminded me I wasn't part of the curated quiet my family paid for. By the time I stepped into the main lodge, most of them were already gathered near the grand fireplace. The annual photo. A ritual dressed in wool sweaters, carefully chosen smiles, and last names whispered like pedigree. The photographer, a thin, bearded man in a beanie, was setting up a tripod. Light bounced off the polished floor, and the entire group was arranged like a catalog family. Delora adjusted Isolde's scarf as if a wrinkle could tarnish the lineage. Torrin held his daughter like a political candidate clutching a baby for a campaign ad. I stood nearby, coffee in hand, watching them form their perfect circle. Delora's voice carried over the chatter. "Let's get the main shot first," she said, turning to the photographer. "We'll include Sandra in the candids." She didn't lower her voice. She didn't look at me. She said it like I was a seasonal employee with a name tag that read support. The photographer hesitated, glanced around. "She's not part of the main group?" Delora gave a tight smile. "She just got in yesterday. Logistics didn't really include her, you know?" A couple of cousins looked down, pretending to fuss with their sleeves. No one spoke. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just stepped away. Back in my room, I opened the organizer I'd carried to every family gathering since college. It was more than habit. It was the one thing that made me feel like I had control, like I could catalog the nonsense, archive it, and keep my balance. Tucked between 2 pages of blank expense forms was a folded piece of yellow paper, a note I hadn't thought about in years. I unfolded it slowly. "Sandra? You see what others miss. That's your gift. Don't let anyone convince you that quiet means weak. Grandpa George." His handwriting was jagged, shaky near the end, but it was him. No one else had ever written to me with that kind of clarity. I sat there for a long time, staring at the note. The room was still, even with the heater ticking. The document from last night, the deed to the resort, sat on my screen. And beside it now, something older. Something that felt like it still mattered. Later, while scrolling through my phone, I saw the photo had already gone live. Isolde had posted it with the caption, "Family is everything." The comments came in waves, people praising her glow, her heart, her leadership, as if she ran the whole weekend, as if no one else existed. I zoomed in. There was a chair at the edge of the group. Empty, mine, cropped out. It didn't make me sad. It made me alert. I opened a spreadsheet I'd started months ago. Event mentions versus presents, 2008 to present. It listed family holidays, who'd been thanked in speeches, who got credit for ideas, who was tagged in photos. The data didn't lie. Patterns never did. I started a new tab. Formal recognition patterns, Hartwell branch. This wasn't about nostalgia anymore. This was structure, systems, and I knew how to work within systems better than anyone expected. After brunch, I typed a message to Eloy. "Let's meet after lunch. I want to go over the transition docs. Conference room a works?" A minute later, his reply came. "Absolutely, I'll have everything ready." I set my phone down and walked to the window. Across the courtyard, the family gathered again, laughing, unaware. This time, I didn't feel left out. I felt ready. The dining hall buzzed with the low hum of weekend indulgence. Mimosas clinked, utensils tapped ceramic plates, and someone laughed too loudly at something Torrin had said. I stepped in quietly, dressed in a charcoal wool blazer, simple, clean. It didn't beg for attention. I'd learned long ago in this family, attention was something you paid for in humiliation. Dolores spotted me first. Her voice, sharp and practiced, carried across the room like it was built to perform. "Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to our little logistics star," she called out, gesturing toward me like I was the intern arriving late to a staff meeting. "Sandra helped get everyone's gear in order, didn't you, dear?" I felt a dozen heads turn. A few smiled. Most just returned to their food. "Oh, really?" one cousin muttered with mock surprise. Someone chuckled. I smiled back, carefully. "I guess some of us manage the details others don't even notice." A beat of silence followed, then a low laugh from the far end of the table. Isolde. She leaned back in her chair, wineglass in hand, her tone sugared, but the bite unmistakable. "Honestly, Sandra, I'm impressed. Running a freelance design business and still finding time to do all this? That's some serious multitasking." I set down my coffee cup slowly. "I don't freelance anymore," I said evenly. "I own the firm now." Isolde blinked, then nodded. "That's wonderful. I mean, technically, everyone owns their LLC, right?" Torin let out a loud laugh. One of the cousins joined in. "Don't take it personally," Delora added, without looking at me. "You know your sister's just teasing." "No," I said, sipping again. "I know exactly what she's doing." Nobody laughed after that, but no one apologized either. I didn't stay for the pastries. I excused myself before the server brought the dessert cart, offering a vague excuse about emails. Back in my room, I locked the door, peeled off the blazer, and sat down at the desk without turning on the main light. I opened my digital journal, a file I kept for moments like these. Let them keep laughing. Every smile they wear now makes the silence later more deafening. I saved the entry and pulled up the email thread with Eloy. The latest message was still marked unread. "Let's proceed with the board meeting prep," I typed. "I may want to address ownership visibility." I clicked send, then leaned back and let the chair creak beneath me. Later that afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the property, not for leisure, observation. I passed my father standing near the spa with one of the lodge managers, giving input like he was part of the board. He wasn't, never had been, but that never stopped any of them from performing proximity to power. Isolde posed for a selfie under the decorative pine arch, holding her glass high. "Can you get the mountains behind me?" she asked Torin, handing him the phone. He adjusted the angle like a trained assistant, then clicked several shots. They moved through the space like they owned it. But they didn't. They never had. What they had was access, and the illusion that came with it. What I had was paper. Legal, binding, undeniable. Back in my room, a notification blinked on my screen. I sat down slowly, dragging the cursor across the subject line. Guest presentation request confirmed. Saturday evening banquet. Perfect. I clicked the screen closed, stood up, and whispered into the empty room. Perfect timing! I stepped into the sitting room, expecting it to be empty, but there he was, Merrick, alone, staring into the fireplace like it owed him something. No scotch in hand, no newspaper, just stillness. I hesitated for a second, but the door was already shut behind me. He didn't look up. I sat in the armchair opposite him. The silence stretched between us, heavy but familiar. "Why do I always feel like a side note in this family?" I asked. He blinked slowly, then finally turned his head. "You were never like the rest of us, Sandra. You never tried to be. You always had your own orbit." "My own orbit," I echoed, tasting the phrase like it was something I might spit out. "You mean I didn't perform the part?" Merrick leaned back. He wasn't cruel. He didn't have to be. He was calm, rational, detached. "You're not wrong for who you are," he said, "but you're not the kind of image this family can build itself around." It didn't hurt, not in the way it might have 10 years ago. It just clarified things. I'd always assumed my mother was the gatekeeper of exclusion, but hearing it from him, quiet, calculated, without a hint of malice, was something else entirely. like being disqualified from a role you never auditioned for, but always wanted to believe was yours. I nodded, stood, and left without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Back in my suite, I moved toward the desk out of habit. The laptop blinked to life as I sat. I typed in my credentials to access the resort's back-end admin portal, the same portal I'd helped redesign months ago. Access denied. I tried again. Different browser, same result. Administrative permissions restricted. I frowned and checked the system log. Someone had requested an override. I called Eloy. He picked up on the second ring. Ms. Hartwell. Someone restricted my access, I said. Why? A pause. It was a temporary request, he said carefully. It came from Isolda's email. I stared at the screen. She doesn't work here. She said it was for coordination purposes, family logistics. I assumed. You assumed wrong, I said flatly. Next time, you call me before you act on that. Yes, ma'am. I ended the call without adding anything else. She wanted to play? Fine. I closed the browser, opened a new folder on my desktop, and began compiling a legal packet labeled Ownership Clarification. Inside it, I placed PDFs of deed transfers, email trails, and system logs, all time-stamped, all clean. It was never about being accepted into their frame. It was about reminding them I built the wall the frame hangs on. I called my attorney. No formal action yet, I said, but prepare the documentation. I want authority reaffirmed, especially on digital systems. Understood, she replied. Want me to include the contingency clause? Yes, I said, in bold. That evening, I didn't go to the pre-banquet cocktail hour. I stayed in, edited a few of the slides I'd prepared for my presentation. Nothing flashy, just facts, ownership documents, impact stats, financial breakdowns that made it impossible to deny the truth, no matter how well dressed the lie. I was reviewing my final slide when my phone buzzed. A message from Isolda. Hey sis, I needed to streamline some access stuff. Hope you're okay with it. I stared at the heart emoji like it was a piece of mold on something I used to enjoy. I deleted the message, then opened my keynote and typed a new title on the cover slide. The Truth Behind the Curtain. I saved the file and whispered into the empty room. I hope you're ready for the full download. Late afternoon draped the terrace in a warm, golden haze. The kind of light people chase in calendars and real estate brochures. The kind of light that made everything look softer than it really was. I stood near the edge of the crowd, a glass of sparkling water in hand. Conversations floated around me like polite static. Laughter in the wrong places, empty toasts, someone bragging about ski lessons they hadn't taken. Just background noise, until I heard Torin. He was standing near the fire pit, his arm casually draped over the back of a chair, speaking to two men in tailored coats. Venture capital, probably. His kind of people. This place? He said, gesturing toward the main building. We've got family and resort operations, premium hospitality connections. This is practically our second home. He pulled out his phone and played a video I knew too well. Smooth shots of the lobby, drone footage of the trails, kitchen staff smiling on cue. I produced that reel. I funded the remodel. I even paid for the damn drone. I didn't step forward. I didn't call him out. I just watched, letting the words dig themselves a hole. Funny how easily some people claim things they never built. It's always easier to pose than to produce. I turned to refill my drink at the bar. One of the men from Torin's group followed. Mid-40s, overconfident in the way only someone with a leased Mercedes could be. You're with operations, right? He asked, motioning to my name tag. Torin said you've been handling a lot of the guest logistics. Something like that, I replied calmly. Well, I gotta say, you've done a great job making him look like a natural leader. Guy's got presence. It landed like a compliment, but it wasn't. It was a gut punch disguised as a handshake. I met his eyes and said evenly, leadership is a mirror. It shows the truth, eventually. He blinked, not quite sure if he'd been insulted. I didn't help him figure it out. Back in my suite, I opened the locked drawer under the desk and pulled out a black envelope. Inside, ownership certificate, title deed, transfer notarization. I laid them out on the table like a dealer stacking cards before the flop. They'd forgotten, or pretended to. Either way, I was done reminding them gently. I slipped the documents back inside the envelope and wrote on the front in sharp black ink, in case they forget again. Then I picked up my phone and messaged Eloy. Have the AV team prep the conference room. We'll need projection access by tomorrow noon. He replied quickly. Confirmed. Should I invite legal? Not yet, I typed, but have them on standby. Outside my window, the sky had deepened into amber, casting long shadows across the lawn. I closed the curtains. I'd seen enough of everyone's backslapping smiles for one day. Just before dinner, I returned to the terrace one last time. Not for the people, but for the vantage point. Torrin was holding court again, gesturing with one hand, the other wrapped around a drink he didn't pay for. He looked right at me, nodded like I should be flattered to be mentioned. I didn't wave. I turned away, headed inside, and whispered to no one in particular. You're going to wish I stayed invisible. By Sunday morning, the chill outside had softened under a cloudless sky, but inside the resort, the temperature was shifting in a different way. I slipped into the lobby just after 9, hoping to confirm a few last details with the AV team. The front desk was humming, staff moving briskly, families checking out, and early banquet guests already circling for attention. Delora stood near the floral arrangement by the fireplace, waving her manicured fingers at a young concierge. Her tone, polished and maternal, landed with authority. I'd like the white roses centered and the gold runners adjusted, she instructed, as though she were directing a Broadway set and not a brunch. The concierge hesitated, scanning his tablet. Pardon, ma'am, but I'll need to confirm that with Ms. Hartwell before proceeding. Her eyes narrowed, but only slightly. I'm her mother. Yes, ma'am, he replied, nodding respectfully. But only the owner can approve expenses from the event budget. She didn't say another word, just watched him walk away with his tablet, toward me. The exchange had taken less than a minute, but I saw it. The slight flinch in her mouth, the quick glance around to see who had heard, the quiet removal of her assumed authority, and the silence that followed. Everything's been confirmed, Ms. Hartwell, the concierge said, approaching me with a small bow of the head. We're all set for tonight. Thank you, I said, loud enough for Delora to hear. I appreciate you double-checking with me. As I turned toward the hallway leading to the AV room, I caught a flicker of motion on the staircase above. Isolde, leaning on the banister like she was auditioning for a silent film. She didn't say anything. She just stared, calculating. She'd seen the shift. She knew something had cracked. Halfway down the corridor, a young assistant carrying a clipboard stepped in my path. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Hartwell? She asked, tilting her head. I was about to answer when she looked over my shoulder and brightened. Oh, maybe that's her? I turned just enough to see Delora behind me, arms crossed. The assistant rushed forward. You just looked in charge, she said. Delora blinked. I'm just the mother. The moment held. A beat too long. The assistant stammered an apology and turned to me. No problem, I said coolly. Easy mistake. I kept walking, straight into the AV room. The tech team was unpacking cables, arranging microphones, prepping projection systems for the banquet. I stayed just long enough to confirm the USB port location and the file format. No fuss. That afternoon, as I was reviewing the presentation, an email pinged into my inbox. Subject line: Tonight's program, by Isolde. CC'd. Multiple family members. 2 resort managers. The guest relations director. I opened the attachment. She'd laid out the entire agenda. Arrival times, seating charts, music cues, even speaker order. Branded in the top right corner, her personal monogram, as if she'd orchestrated the event herself. The email ended with, Hope that's okay, Sandra. I didn't respond. Instead, I clicked forward, typed in Eloy's name, and wrote 2 words: prepare playback. That evening, I went to the projection booth while they were finalizing the lighting. The technician greeted me politely. Anything we should cue before the speeches? I handed him the USB. Play this when they call her name, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Trust me, I added. It's the right name. The lights dimmed just enough to make the crystal glasses gleam. Soft piano music played in the background as guests found their seats at the long banquet tables. The room buzzed with polite chatter, clinks of silverware on porcelain, and the subtle rustle of designer fabrics adjusting in high-backed chairs. I stood in the wings near the projection booth, just out of sight. I didn't need to see their faces to know who was faking a laugh and who was faking importance. I knew this performance by heart, but tonight's script had a rewrite. Isolde took the stage with the confidence of someone who thought the spotlight belonged to her. She wore champagne-colored silk, her smile wide enough to press her cheeks into faint dimples. The room quieted. "Good evening, everyone," she began, voice like honey dripped over glass. "On behalf of the Hartwell family, we're so grateful you could join us tonight." A few nods, scattered clapping. "We've prepared something special, a look at where we've been, where we're going, and what makes this place and this family so exceptional." She turned to the screen, giving a dramatic pause like she'd rehearsed it. "Let's begin." The lights dimmed further. For a beat, the room held its breath. Then, it began. But not the video she expected. The screen flashed white, then cut to a crisp black title card. "Legacy requires truth." A deep, steady voice filled the room, my voice. This resort has stood as a symbol of resilience, and like most legacies, it wasn't built by appearances, but by action. Footage rolled. Not the staged clips Isolde curated, but real moments. Contractors working long hours, staff meetings I led, renovation timelines signed by my name. In one clip, I stood on scaffolding in a hard hat, reviewing blueprints. Then, side-by-side financial charts, before and after I took over operations. A staff interview. A quote from Grandpa George. "Legacy is earned, not worn like a lapel pin." Isolde stiffened at the center of the room. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Delora's hand twitched toward her wineglass, but Merrick placed a steadying hand on hers. As the video ended, a final screen appeared. Ownership verified. Sandra M. Hartwell, sole executor, Hartwell Resort Trust. Silence. I walked out from the side of the room. Not rushed, not dramatic, just present. A few guests turned in their seats. Some clapped, awkward, hesitant. Most just watched. I stepped up to the mic and looked out across the room. Familiar faces suddenly felt like strangers caught in someone else's lie. "For years," I began, "I stayed silent. I let you name me, exclude me, reinterpret my life as background logistics." I took a breath. "But I've been at the center of every real operation this place has run. You just didn't see it." A murmur. Then stillness. "I didn't do any of it for applause, and I'm not doing this now for revenge. I'm doing it because at some point, the truth deserves to breathe." Delora began to rise. Merrick leaned in and whispered something. She sat back down, face unreadable. Merrick stood instead. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "Don't do this now, Sandra," he said quietly. "Let's not shame your mother." I looked directly at him. "I spent years saving your face, Dad. Tonight, I'm saving mine." His eyes dropped. I turned back to the room. "Starting tomorrow, roles will be realigned, not erased." There was a pause, then a slow, uncertain round of applause. A few stood, most stayed seated. The family didn't clap at all. I left the stage without waiting for anything more. As I passed Aloy near the back doors, I leaned in just enough for him to hear. "Make sure the documents go out first thing, all of them." He nodded once, and I walked out, not looking back. The next morning came with the clarity only silence brings. No music, No staff milling about with champagne flutes, just luggage wheels dragging across tile and the low hum of checkout chatter. I stood on the mezzanine level of the resort, leaning slightly over the railing, watching the final acts unfold. Down in the lobby, Delora was in position, heel tapped, purse clutched, voice prepped. She approached the front desk with the confidence of someone rehearsing a return to form. "I'm here to settle the Hartwell family suite block," she announced to the young clerk, who tapped into the computer with professional speed. I watched his brow lift slightly before he looked up. "Actually, ma'am, all suite charges for the Hartwell Group were billed under Sandra Hartwell Holdings, LLC. Delora blinked. Her hand, mid-reach for her card, froze. She hesitated just long enough for heads nearby to turn slightly. Merrick stepped in, smoothing over the tension with that measured, rehearsed voice. "Then just hand me the receipt. I'll sign it." The clerk didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, sir. We can only release the invoice to the account holder." A small pause. Not dramatic, just enough for the words to land. I descended the stairs slowly, no rush, no performance, just the timing of someone who already knew what the script said. "Here you go, Miss Hartwell," the clerk said as I approached, handing me the folder without needing to confirm a single thing. I nodded once, didn't look at either of them, just opened it, verified the amounts, and signed. "Thank you," I said. The clerk smiled. "Have a safe trip, Ms. Hartwell." Behind me, Merrick exhaled through his nose. Delora didn't speak at all. Isolde and Torin, seated near the fireplace with matching cups of espresso they hadn't paid for, glanced up. Isolde's smile was brittle. Torin said nothing. The cousins barely made eye contact. One waved quickly, then busied himself with a scarf that didn't need adjusting. The air was thick, not with anger, but with realization. The play had ended, and they had been supporting cast all along. I spent the next hour walking through final confirmations with resort staff, thanking the event manager, going over remaining tasks with housekeeping, confirming payroll with Aloy. Delora lingered near the doors. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was just watching. She didn't look furious. She looked small. Aloy joined me as we moved past the concierge desk, reviewing a brief checklist. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't need to. The energy had changed. We both knew it. After everyone had gone, after the last car service had pulled away and the glass doors sighed shut, I rode the elevator to the top floor. My suite still held the faint scent of eucalyptus and something floral. I stepped out onto the balcony. The parking lot below was nearly empty. One car pulled out. Another hesitated at the stop sign before turning. "Everything hit?" Eloy asked from just inside. I nodded. "Hit. Landed. Filed." He waited a moment. Then, quietly, "That line about realigning roles? That shook them." I looked out at the quiet horizon, snow still clinging to the mountain ridges in the distance. "It wasn't about the bill," I said finally. "It was about everything they charged to my name without ever admitting it." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Below us, a final shuttle pulled away. I turned to him, my voice even. "Next time they want a reservation, they'll need to go through corporate." The brunch was set in the small dining room with a view of the lower slope trails, sun catching on fresh snow like it had been staged. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I'd arrived 5 minutes after the posted time on purpose, just long enough to let everyone else settle into their roles. They were already seated when I walked in. Delora was mid-conversation with one of my cousins about next year's venue, acting as if the last 48 hours had never happened. Merrick scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice me. Isolde was at the far end, in a muted navy wrap dress, her hair tied back like she was auditioning for humility. It didn't suit her. As I entered, the maitre d' approached with a subtle bow and gestured toward the head of the table. "Ms. Hartwell, your seat is ready." I nodded, took my place, and didn't bother looking around to gauge reactions. But I felt them. Delora's hand froze mid-stir in her tea. Merrick blinked once, then returned to his screen. Isolde opened her mouth slightly, then closed it without saying a word. The table adjusted around the shift without acknowledgement, the way people at a funeral avoid discussing the deceased directly. Brunch began with soft jazz in the background and polite murmurs. Plates were passed, mimosas sipped, and then came the soft chime of respect. "Ms. Hartwell," the chef appeared briefly at my side. "The smoked salmon was prepared as per your previous notes. I hope it meets your expectations." "Perfect," I replied with a small nod. Across the table, Delora leaned in toward Isolde, her voice a whisper I wasn't meant to hear, but did anyway. They talk to her like she owns the place. Isolde didn't miss a beat. Because she does. No one challenged the seating. No one dared ask for a rearrangement. The weight of the weekend sat heavy in the air, like frost on glass. Merrick finally raised his glass, not quite high, not quite steady. "To Sandra," he said, "for making this weekend unforgettable." The room shifted slightly. The words hung there, half sincere, half forced. But it was a start, a crack in the granite. I let the toast pass without returning it. Some silences are more honest than any response. As plates were cleared and dessert declined, I stood, smoothed my jacket, and offered a polite smile. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "I hope you've enjoyed your stay." I nodded toward the event manager stationed near the corner. She stepped forward, holding a small stack of cream-colored envelopes. "We'd like to leave you with a small note of thanks," she said, distributing them one by one. Each envelope was handwritten. Each carried the same message inside. "Next year's bookings will be reviewed. We'll be in touch." They all received one. Except Delora. She watched as the envelopes were handed out, her expression unreadable. When the last one was given and none came her way, she glanced at me, but said nothing. I met her gaze without blinking. It wasn't revenge. It was order. Afterward, as the family slowly filed out, saying goodbyes that didn't mean much, I remained at the table with my coffee. The warmth of the cup grounded me. Outside, a few early skiers zigzagged down the nearby slope, unaware of the quiet reconfiguring that had just taken place. Above the fireplace hung a portrait of Grandpa George, standing beside the original resort sign, hand on his hip, eyes clear and steady. I looked up at him and murmured, "I didn't fix them, Grandpa, but I finally stopped letting them break me." By the time I returned to my suite that evening, the hallways had gone quiet. No more clinking glassware or perfumed chatter, just the echo of heels on polished floors and the occasional thud of a suitcase wheel turning a corner. The living room was untouched since brunch. A few untouched petals from the centerpiece still sat on the table. My coat lay over the armrest where I'd left it. Everything looked the same, but the air felt different. Emptier, lighter. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find one of the housekeepers I'd seen around the resort all week. "Ms. Hartwell," she said gently, "your family checked out about an hour ago. Quietly. No staff requested. But someone left something for you." She handed me a small envelope. I thanked her and closed the door. I stood for a moment, debating whether to open it. Curiosity didn't win, neither did sentiment. I opened it because I didn't want it lying around like a ghost. Inside was a short note in Merrick's tidy handwriting. "You've changed. We didn't expect you to forgive, but we hope you won't forget us either. M." I folded the paper in half without rereading it and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk. There was nothing in those lines I didn't already know. They were always better at writing history than living it. I wandered into the lounge and stood in the middle of the room. It had been rearranged, no longer set for entertaining, just ready to be cleaned. I sat on the edge of the couch and pulled out my phone. One unread message in the Hartwell family group chat. "Thanks for the memories." Isolde tapped the chat title, scrolled past the muted pictures and unread comments, and hit Leave Group. The confirmation popped up. "Are you sure you want to leave?" Yes. No anger, no hesitation. Just clarity. Later that evening, I found Eloy in the kitchen. He was rinsing teacups and humming to himself. It was a quiet song, something without lyrics, just melody. You didn't need to make a scene, he said, handing me a clean mug. I took it. I didn't make one. I just let them see what they've been pretending not to. We sat at the table, steam rising between us. He didn't press, and I didn't fill the silence. Some things didn't need narration. After tea, I walked down the hallway that used to display framed pictures of our family. They were gone. In their place hung a landscape print I'd commissioned. Clean lines, soft light, a path through trees with no people in sight. No names, no faces. Just air and space. I paused in front of it. Not to admire the photo, but to absorb the absence it offered. For the first time, it didn't feel like something had been taken. It felt like something had finally been removed. Back in my room, I picked up my phone again. I opened the message draft I'd started 2 nights ago and finally hit send. Forward the property restructuring terms to legal. Include the boundary clause. I watched the message land and waited for the little delivered checkmark. It came. I set the phone down and closed the laptop. Sometimes, walking away isn't surrender. It's refusal. Refusal to keep standing in rooms where the door's only ever been cracked, never open. The early sun filtered through a thin veil of clouds, casting a soft glow over the garden terrace. I'd skipped breakfast, not out of rebellion, but instinct. My appetite had been replaced by something else, stillness, the kind that doesn't need permission. I sipped a quiet cup of tea, shoes off, feet resting on the edge of the warm stone. A senior staff member approached from the side path. Angela. She'd been with the resort longer than any of the Hartwells had cared to notice. She carried a cream envelope. "This is from the team," she said, voice kind. "We just wanted to say, you made this place better." I took the envelope and smiled. Not out of politeness, but recognition. Real recognition. Inside was a folded card, hand-signed by every department, even housekeeping, even the ski instructors, for the one who didn't just inherit the walls, but rebuilt the foundation. I swallowed against the lump rising in my throat. Not grief, not pride, just anchored. "Thank you," I said, knowing it meant more than the words could hold. Angela nodded and left me with the breeze and my tea. Mid-morning came gently. I returned to the suite, packed without rush. Every item folded with care, each movement unhurried. I wasn't running from anything, just stepping into something clearer. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Leora, my cousin, younger by 10 years and quieter by nature. She shifted her weight and looked up at me like she was still deciding whether to speak. "Was it really you?" she asked finally. "All of it? The renovations, the staff, the ownership?" I stepped aside, let her in. "I didn't do it to be seen," I said, "but I'm glad someone finally looked." Leora sat on the edge of the couch. "I wish I'd asked sooner." "You still can." She nodded slowly. We didn't say much more, but sometimes the most honest conversations don't need many words. Later, I wandered through the library before leaving. Near the back was a display of the resort's history, sepia-toned photographs, blueprints, a tribute plaque for Grandpa George. At the end of the photo book, a new page had been added. 2023, ownership transition completed. Vision, integrity before inheritance. No name, but there didn't need to be. By early afternoon, I rolled my suitcase down the stone path myself. No staff, no ceremony. I liked it better that way. I tossed my bag into the trunk, shut it with a clean click, and slid into the driver's seat of the SUV I'd come in. Same vehicle, very different woman. As I pulled past the front gate, the resort shrank in the rear view, its windows blinking like quiet witnesses. Peace doesn't come from being heard. It comes from not needing to explain anymore. I passed the last curve in the road and exhaled, the sound soft but full. Next season, This table seats differently.